They told me to hand in my rifle and my dream in the same breath. I remember the way Sergeant Whitaker didn't quite meet my eyes when he said it. The firing line smelled like burnt powder and wet pine. The Oregon rain had come and gone all week, and the range looked like a jaw full of old teeth berms, targets, wind flags tugging like restless tongues. I had just broken a shot from the cold bore station, and it landed 2 inches right enough to earn the tiniest nod from the spotters. Scope, not enough to win anyone's faith. Then came the stress test. Sprint 50 yards, drop, calculate a hasty wind, and fire at a 3-inch circle at 400. I did everything right, except my hands wouldn't listen. The quiver wasn't dramatic. You wouldn't have seen it if you didn't know to look. It lived in the whirls of my fingertips, translated through steel to glass. The reticle swam a hair's breadth from center as the green flag twitched, as my breath tried to be smaller than it was. The shot broke clean. The miss was cleaner. The spotter called, "Wide right, 8 o'clock," and my heart called. "You already knew. You've got the brain for this," Whitaker said after he took the rifle from me. "You've got the eyes. But it isn't a math test. We can teach calculations. We can't teach whatever this is." He flicked 2 fingers at the space between his sternum and his throat, where calm was supposed to live. "I'm sorry, Quinn. I wasn't. Not then. Not when I stood at the edge of the range and swallowed the metallic taste of wanting something that didn't want me back. Sorrow takes time. It has to put down roots." That first afternoon, I only felt the tiny electric hum of humiliation and the strange, defensive pride that comes when someone underestimates you in a way that might be correct for now. I turned in my pass, shook the hands I owed handshakes to, and walked the long gravel road to the small parking lot where my department cruiser waited. Grayport is a harbor town with delusions of being a city. Tourist brochures say we're halfway between wild and polished. Locals say the ocean throws its leftovers at our feet, and we make a living out of the salvage. My job patrol officer, second year, was mostly sea salt and small dramas, fishery disputes, ferry delays, noise complaints that sounded like marriages. Dying 1 decibel at a time, I sat behind the wheel and stared at my hands until they were only hands again. No tremor, no betrayal, just 10 quiet proofs that I was here. The radio burbled something about a disabled vehicle on Harbor Drive. I keyed the mic and forced my voice steady. Unit 12 en route. That night, after shift, I went home to the apartment over the bookstore where the roof leaked whenever a storm argued with the moon. I made tea. I didn't drink it. On the floor, against the far wall, I had laid out the battered .22 that belonged to my grandfather. It was the rifle that taught me silence has shape and patience has a sound. I dry-fired until the kettle grew cold and the rain tried a new rhythm against the window. I stopped counting at 500 in the morning. I did it again. I didn't tell anyone I'd tried out for the regional sniper pool. If you fail in private, it's an ache with edges you can sand down yourself. If you fail in public, people want to touch it. They want to make it about them, their opinions, their expectations, their stories about your story. I wasn't ready to be inspirational or cautionary. I wanted, stubbornly, to be undecided. A week later, Grayport returned to its usual pulse. The fishing fleet came in shy of dawn, gulls and diesel and men who spoke in knots. The ferry to the island coughed tourists onto the quay with cameras slung like medals. The driftwood artist on Alder Street arranged logs into horses that looked like they might scatter if the wind dared whistle. I wrote reports in a language made of checkboxes and careful adjectives. I laughed at my partner's jokes, even when they were half bad and half true. And at night, I went to the old logging road above the marsh, where no one would bother a woman. Lying prone on a tarp, whispering numbers to the ghosts. You can't practice calm by commanding your heart to behave. You have to trick it. I'd bring a metronome and set it slow, then try to breathe in time with it without getting bored. I'd balance a nickel on the rifle barrel and press the trigger until the coin didn't fall, until the word press didn't mean pull anymore. I threaded a piece of fishing line through the front sight and watched it tremble in wind. That my face still swore was nothing at all. I learned the language of leaves, the side they showed when a gust came wanting. I taught myself to hear distance with my eyes. The tremor didn't vanish. It learned manners. It waited until I gave it a job. The harder I focused on what I couldn't control, the louder it got. When I widened my attention sky, smell of salt, grit under my elbows, the precise weight of decision my body exhaled and remembered to belong to me. In late June, the city hung banners, Harbor Days. It's our one festival that doesn't pretend to be modest. Food trucks from Portland, folk bands from everywhere, craft beer with names like Undertow Blonde and Netcutter. Red, a fireworks barge would anchor out beyond the breakwater. There'd be kids with glow sticks and parents with a peculiar courage. Sugar gives. Grayport PD would have extra shifts, extra radios, extra patience. I volunteered for Main Street crowd control and secretly prayed for boring. On the morning of Harbor Days, I woke before my alarm and went running along the promenade. The ocean had a gray, listening look. I stopped at the overlook above Coho Pier and watched workers move crates in slow choreography. Two gulls argued over a strip of something that used to be alive. The lighthouse at Whale Point blinked like a calm eye. I told myself I was fine. Around noon, I stopped by the bookstore before heading to briefing. The owner, Mr. Delaney, had a way of recommending titles that solved problems you didn't admit to having. He looked at me over his glasses and said, "You look like someone who needs something to carry in your pocket that has nothing to do with bullets." He handed me a tiny book of Rilke poems. "For the pauses," he said. I bought it. I don't always take advice, but when I do, I like it to come wrapped in paper and stitched with thread. Briefing was a map of the day pinned to the wall and coffee, so strong it could cauterize regret. The captain ran through assignments. "Quinn, you're with Oates at the north end of Maine. Families, funnel them toward the vendors. Keep the street clear for EMSA." The plan sounded like a recipe for normal. My shoulders lowered an inch. By Ione. 3. Main Street had the gleam of a celebration that hasn't yet learned consequences. Music, salt, the kind of laughter that dares the afternoon to be as good as it promises. Oates did his community cop thin fist bumps for kids, dad jokes. For dads, a wink for a grandmother who wore a hat shaped like a squid. I scanned. That's what you do when your brain wants problems in high definition. You look for edges that don't belong. A backpack left too long near a bench. A man whose eyes count exits instead of string lights. The storm under a smile. We found nothing and everything as always. A scraped knee, a wallet turned in by a third grader, a lost teenager who turned out to be a 23-year-old influencer who'd wandered off from her own live stream. Around sunset, the festival grew a second wind. The harbor turned to bronze. The Ferris wheel lit up like a ship that remembered it was a star. The fireworks barge slid into position beyond the breakwater, a patient steel island. I watched the wind flags they'd staked at intervals along the Mai. Jetty, lazy, uncertain, the kind that makes a crosswind feel like a cat playing with your best intentions. I told myself again that I was fine. Then the drone appeared, and my chest. Forgot what fine meant. At first, it was just a sound, a high mosquito whine trying to be casual. Most people didn't hear it over the music. I did. I've always heard the small things, the tiny wrongs in a room of right. The noise grew coming from the direction of the old cannery. I turned toward the harbor and saw it crest the edge of the warehouse roof, an angular insect with 4 propellers and a body roughly the size of a shoebox. It flew like someone who didn't know how to stroll. "Oates," I said. He was all ready. Looking up, his hand went to his radio. Mine went to the bone space behind my ear where fear and certainty share a fence. The drone pitched, corrected, dipped. It had weight slung under its belly, something wrapped in black tape. That's when my body did that old arithmetic. Angle, mass, speed, intent. My mind wrote the equal sign. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. We've got a drone, west of Maine, over the cannery, moving toward the harbor. Possible payload. My voice was too calm. When I'm scared, I sound like I'm reading a recipe for bread. The captain came back immediate. 12 copy. All units, eyes up. Fireworks barge is a hard no-go zone. Quinn, Oates, get people under cover. If that thing heads for the crowd, we're canceling the show. We started shepherding. The word felt both kind and absurd. You cannot politely move 1,000 hearts at once. You make space. You put your body where panic would like to be. The drone swung out over the water, wobbled, and then, like a magpie spotting something shiny, leaned toward the barge. Who's running EOD? I asked as if anyone could conjure a bomb tech from thin air. County team is 30 out, the captain said. Feds are farther. We're on our own for the next 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a lifetime. I said mostly to myself. Oates looked at me. He isn't a poet. He saw what I saw. Ilara, he said, voice small. If that thing hits the barge, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. We both imagined fire riding the wind through. A sea of people, sparks trading names with failure. The drone bobbed, fighting the coastal gusts. It was not a pro's hands on the sticks. That almost made it worse. Malice you can predict. Incompetence you can't. Captain, I said, we need a shooter. We don't have one, he answered. State police are stuck on the highway. Their marksman is with them. I heard myself ask the question I had promised never to ask again. What about me? The pause on the radio had gravity. The captain knew I'd tried out. Everybody knows everything eventually. He also knew I hadn't made it. No, he said. Negative, Quinn. Keep the crowd moving. I tried. I really did. But the drone shifted again, lower now, drifting toward the barge as if gravity had a grudge. The wind had picked up, and the flags along the jetty now agreed, all pointing seaward. Steady at maybe 10 knots, gusting to 15. You learn to see wind like a language. Ripples on water, the way a seagull corrects with a wingtip, a streamer's lean. This wind wrote, hurry. I thought of Whitaker's 2 fingers tapping his sternum. I thought of my grandfather's .22 and the nickel that didn't fall. I thought of Mr. Delaney's little book of poems folded in my pocket like a quiet order. And then I thought of what would happen if I obeyed fear instead of skill. Captain, I said again, softer, for him and for me. Nobody else is close enough. Nobody else has a line. I can get elevation on the church tower. If I wait until it's over open water, if I time the gust, if I put the shot through the battery, we can drop it harmless. Another pause. In that long breath, a father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders so she could see the Ferris wheel better. A couple argued in whispers about mustard. A teenager posed with her neon cotton candy like it was a lover. And the drone kept coming. Quinn, the captain said, his voice switching from command to something older. If you miss, if you hit the payload, if it detonates, I won't miss the way you fear, I said. I've been practicing for a no I got last month. Oates touched my sleeve. He didn't try to stop me. He also didn't know how to stand in the way of a person who already decided to walk. Go, he said. I'll keep them back. I ran. Main Street turned to cobblestone under my feet at Alder, and then to granite up the steps of St. Bridget's. The church was one of those brick shoulders that has held a town's grief and gratitude for 100 years. The bell tower was open to the sky, and the ladder to the platform sighed like an old man when I climbed it 2 rungs at a time. I radioed as I moved. Unit 12 taking position at St. Bridget's Tower. I'll have a line across the harbor. requesting permission to retrieve a long gun from the trunk. Denied, came automatic. Then softer. What's in your trunk? The department's patrol rifle. It's not a precision tool, I said. But at 200 meters, with a gust drop and a little luck, I stopped myself. Luck was a word for people who don't believe in work. With a clean trigger, I corrected dot silence. Then, do it, on my authority. Wait for water. Under it. This is not a hero play, Quinn. If it goes bad, I know, I said. I reached the platform and sucked a wider breath than the ladder would allow. The harbor unrolled below me. Barge, breakwater, the black seam of deeper water beyond. I popped the trunk remote on my key fob and watched as Oates, a blue dot with shoulders, moved to my cruiser. He grabbed the hard case and looked up toward the tower. I waved once. He took the stairs two at a time and arrived at the base of the ladder pink with exertion. You sure? He asked, his face a weather map that couldn't quite predict. No, I said, but I'm certain. I slung the rifle and climbed to the platform's lip. It wasn't ideal. The parapet was rough stone, and the field of fire had gaps where chimney pots and old iron ornaments pretended to be important. My line to the barge was mostly clean. The drone was now 50 feet above the water, yawing like a drunk dragonfly. Its payload swung and then steadied. It was closer than I'd wanted. Farther than anyone had planned, Captain, I said. I have eyes on. Wind 5 to 7 at ground, 10 to 15 at 30 feet, gusting. Target is sloppy. Controllers overcorrecting. I'm going to wait for a hover and cut the battery. Copy, he said. EMS and fire are staged. Everyone else is holding their breath. Don't, I said, before I could stop myself. Breathe, it helps. I dropped prone and built a position that would hold in a storm. Toes out, legs relaxed, sling tight, elbows where the stone said they belonged. I checked my backdrop 3 times. Beyond the drone was ocean. Beyond the ocean was more ocean. If everything went right, the only casualty would be hubris. I adjusted the optic. The crosshair felt familiar, like a road back to a home I wasn't sure I deserved. I let my eyes go wide before I narrowed them to the reticle's thin resolve. I took in light shadow, the high glitter of gulls contemplating whether a strange buzzing thing might be edible. Then I let the world shrink to a box and a line, and the idea of a shot I had been practicing for when no one was watching. Scope, I whispered, not because anyone needed to hear it, but because words can sometimes be scaffolding. Time behaves differently when you mean something to it. My heart wanted to show up in the reticle like a confession. I let it be background music. I watched the drone. It drifted left, right, dipped, steadied. A gust pushed it hard, and I saw the pilot overcorrect again, then perhaps chastened. Try to calm their own breathing. The wind flags on the jetty wrote in a new hand. The water wore cat paws where gusts scratched. I held my aim not where the drone was, but where it might be when the bullet finished its small errand. I felt the trigger like a secret I had decided to share. Quinn, the captain said in my ear, voice reduced to just a man with a worry. Say the word if you're not taking it. I'm already in the word, I said. I'm just deciding how to spell it. The drone settled in a wobbling hover. It was over open water now. Beyond the barge, angling as if it intended to reverse and come in lower. It was the best window I'd get. The crosshair walked toward the body, just aft of center where the battery pack would live in most designs. I had studied them, at midnight when my hands wouldn't sleep, on videos and forums. I knew the shapes of weak points the way a violinist knows a fretboard in the dark. I exhaled to natural pause. The metronome I didn't need ticked in memory, and then forgot itself. The shot broke. I didn't hear it the way the crowd would sharp crack flung across water like an insult. From the tower, it felt more like a decision turning into sound. The rifle recoiled into me like an old friend too careful to hug hard. Impact? Oates breathed from below. I rode the scope back, Eyes open, follow-through tight as prayer. Through the reticle, I watched the drone shudder. It tilted, corrected, tilted again. The payload swung once in a fast arc. The body hiccuped, and a voice on the harbor screamed. A gull launched upward, offended by physics. Somewhere on Main Street, a child laughed at a joke that belonged to a world where drones never carried anything worse than cameras. Somewhere. Inside me, the thin shape of the tryout range went quiet. I saw sparks bloom at the drone's belly, tiny, ferocious like the beginning of a word. The machine sagged sideways, listing toward the barge as if it couldn't decide whether to die politely or make a scene. The wind surged. I held my breath without meaning to dot, and then the drone began to fall. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Fall spinning not like a leaf but like a coin, a glittering wobble that made its own bad weather. The payload burned in hiccups along the tape seams, little starbursts of orange that died as the wind stole their oxygen. For a heartbeat, the drone seemed to remember flight and pitched back toward the barge in one stubborn tilt. Correction, I murmured, and my finger found the trigger's second wall again. Quinn, hold. The captain snapped in my ear. Payload is unstable if you hit it. I won't, I said, but my mouth had gone dry. And dry mouths are liars. The crosshair chased the mounting bracket instead of the belly. Not the thing itself, but the thing that held the thing. The way you stop a fight by reaching for the wrist, not the fist. The wind shouldered the drone left. I leaned the aim a whisper right. I let the air go out of me to the small ledge between breaths where decisions balanced. The second shot felt like a sentence I had practiced in my sleep. The bracket sheared. The package dropped, a clean sever, hitting water with a spit of steam. And a sulky hiss. The drone, relieved of its bad idea, wheeled away like a gull that had tried to eat a sparkler and changed religions. It fell 10 feet, caught a last eddy, and then collapsed into the harbor with the soft grief of exhausted machinery. Silence is loud when 8,000 people find it at once. A beat later, the harbor coughed out sound again, human, relieved, and ragged. Oates whooped from the base of the ladder. The cheer tumbled down Main in a wave. Boat horns answered like old men slapping backs. Quinn, the captain said, voice notched in the throat. Do not move. Stay put. I need you on glass until EOD says that bathtub is just a bathtub. Copy, I said, though my muscles had already started writing their own thank yous into stone. I stayed prone, scope tense. The package bobbed 20 yards off. The bow of the fireworks barge. The crew on deck flinched, then froze, caught between curiosity and the memory of instructions read aloud in fluorescent rooms. I could see their faces sunburnt, sober in the way men get when math and fire are neighbors. Harbor master to all units. A new voice cracked over a shared channel. We're shutting down the barge. Fireworks canceled. Repeat, canceled. Safety protocols engaged. A chorus of groans rose from the crowd, gorgeous because it meant people were alive to complain. Oates' head appeared at the parapet. If I buy you a beer for the rest of your life, he said, will you accept installments? Make it. Tea, I said. Mr. Delaney's little book pressed against my ribs like a small, smug talisman. I scanned beyond the bobbing package to the cannery roof, the drone's origin. Heat shimmer fought me across the water, but I could make out a rectangle of shadow near the ducting, a human-shaped hesitation that decided, and then ran. Gray hoodie, black pack, the posture of someone who thinks they're invisible if they don't look at the world looking back. Movement on the cannery roof, I called. South end, heading for the freight stairs. One subject, possible controller, black pack, gray hoodie. Ground units, cut him off at the west alley. Copy, came a chorus, boots beginning to handshake with pavement. Quinn, the captain said, you're still my overwatch. Hold your nest. EO'd is 5 out. I swallowed the urge to climb. The rifle and the view were a harness that fit too well. I watched the hoodie blur vanish, then reappear at the stairwell hatch. He shouldered through, disappeared inside, and the roof went back to being a roof in a town that would later swear it had always been safe. On the water, 2 patrol skiffs. Nose toward the package, sirens off, lights soft. One of the deckhands on the barge knelt with a hook pole, reaching, then thinking better of reaching. The package spun lazily, then bumped the pole with the blind insistence of an object that still believed in mischief. Scanners pinging. Someone on a boat said, their voice thinned by radio. Timer circuit present. Battery heat. No RF. Signature now, meaning? Oates asked for the benefit of all of us with badges and without bomb school. Meaning, the voice said, it is not calling home, but it might be on a kitchen timer we don't like. Let it drift, the captain ordered. No heroes. Keep the public back. Quinn, keep that glass busy. I kept it busy on the cannery. The stairwell door swung once, then stilled. Pigeons asserted their bland dominion. On a lower roofline, a tarp snapped against a pallet stack. A second drone sat half-assembled beneath it like a thought interrupted. I dialed the optics magnification down to shape rather than detail and swept the block alleys, yawning dark. Dumpster lids tipped like tongues, the industrial geometry of a place that existed to ship fish and today shipped fear. Units on the ground, I said. Be advised, secondary drone spotted under a green tarp, lower roof, north of the original position. 2 stories above the alley with the mural of the salmon. It looks like it's missing a prop in my patience. Copy. Came Officer Loong from the engine company already staging ladders, the way fire moves like chess. We've got eyes, we'll secure it. I didn't realize I was shaking until the stock trembled against the pulse point in my shoulder. It wasn't the old tremor exactly. It was its cousin who drinks espresso. I flattened my hand against the stone and let it feel cold. Cold is honest. It doesn't tell stories about you, it just is. Quinn. The captain again. You good? Yes, I said, which was true in the way that a bridge is true while the wind is testing it. E-Aid rolled up with 2 techs in civilian clothes that wore authority anyway. One had a face like questions. The other had hands like answers. They knelt on the deck of the closer patrol skiff, assembled an aquatic retrieval rig that looked like a metal manta ray and a very careful apology. They didn't rush. Rushing is how you meet consequences you didn't invite. Quinn, one of them, said into local, "This is Laird County E-Aid. Stay on scope for my sake. If you see any swimmers with good intentions and poor judgment, please discourage. Copy, Laird." The manta slid into water with a sigh. The package bumped it like 2 strangers at a bad party. Laird used a pole grip to encourage a net under. The thing then cinched. The skiff engines burbled backward. The whole scene moved a meter at a time, like the ocean had decided to go to couples therapy. A gull swooped low, as if auditioning for a Darwin Award. It reconsidered at the last second. I thought about the math of shrapnel and distance and angle, and felt the old training manual open in my muscles and lay down a page. Look, breathe, respect. The package reached the quay where the E-Odd truck had vomited gear. Laird and his partner Vega. Someone said met it with a hook, kept it rolling. Quick on the parts that were about not dying, and slow on the parts where impatience wore disguises. They swabbed the casing, sprinkled something that smelled like Apocalypse's chewed gum, and sighed together in the way people do when a diffused problem goes to sleep instead of to war. Negative burst risk. Vega called. Initiator scorched, battery vented, timer cooked. Someone read the internet and skipped the footnotes. Waves of relief moved through the crowd like wind through high grass. Children cried for fireworks nobody would see. Parents promised tomorrow like it was a currency you could spend twice. In the tower, I allowed myself one breath that was more fiction than function. Quinn, "You can come down," the captain said. "Good work. Then get to the cannery. We've got a hole where a hoodie was." I slung the rifle, lowered it muzzle to stone, and touched the parapet with the back of my fingers the way you thank a horse. Oates waited at the bottom with the kind of grin that happens once on purpose and then forever in retellings. "Famous," he said, handing back the case. "I'll trade famous for useful," I said. "Cannery?" We ran. The alleys had their own weather cooler, damp smells that hugged low. Brine, old wood, the secret rot of cardboard. The mural salmon watched us with the unnerving confidence of creatures who never leave. Loon had already climbed to the lower roof and had the second drone in custody, like a dog promises when it knows the leash means treats. "No battery," she called down. "No armament, just bones and guts. Suspect?" Oates asked as we shouldered through the freight door into a stairwell that had cataloged a century of boots. "Lost him at the mezzanine," Ramirez answered from the radio. "He cut through the packing floor then, into the old office suites. Harbor Master says there's a service tunnel under the loading dock that exits near the rail spur. We're checking." We found the packing floor and the story of fish written in stains that would be there when the building fell. Footprints, fresh, cut a path through dust toward a door whose push bar remembered recent hands. I pressed my ear to the metal. The hall beyond smelled like cold coffee and printer toner. We moved. Offices are museums of intentions. On one desk, a calendar still showed April 2009. A whiteboard listed Q2 goals in a green scrawl. Someone had drawn a tiny cartoon boat riding a wave of optimism. At the end of the corridor, a window gaped on a loading dock where light had the color of decisions made too late. Ramirez's voice came tight. "We've got the tunnel. Gate is cut. Fresh. Subject headed east. Units converging," the captain said. "Quinn." Oates take the rail spur side. "Contain if you can." No heroics. He could be wired. The tunnel breathed the old cold, the railway's breath of iron and stories. We emerged into a tangle of bracken and crumbling concrete where the spur had given up on trains. 50 yards ahead, a figure vaulted a chain-link section by stepping onto an electrical box like he'd been there yesterday. His hoodie flashed. Gray, his pack blacker. "Police!" Oates barked, and the figure did what figures do, ran like truth was on a timer. We chased. Adrenaline laid a hot hand on the back of my neck and steered. The ground chewed our ankles. The suspect cut right through a gap beside a derelict boxcar, then left across a strip of cracked asphalt that had once been a road and now was a suggestion. "East. East parallel to seafront." I panted into radio. "Subject is fast, nose." The path. A twin-note siren chirped ahead. Patrol units pinched the block. The suspect glanced back, a profile cut from resolve and error, then committed to a bad idea, a drainage culvert half full of harbor water. He bounded into the muck. Splashed hard, slipped, recovered. We followed onto the culvert wall where balance is a religion. "Stop!" Oates again, close enough that the word might have been a hand. The hoodie turned his face once. He was younger than I wanted him to be and older than consequences forgive. His eyes were the blue you get from sleeping badly. He reached inside. The hoodie pocket. Hands. I screamed, gun up, all the pieces lining into the shape-training chisels. "Hands now." He hesitated, then threw something toward the culvert's dark small black, a rectangle with a stubby antenna. The object hit the water and vanished with a smug gulp. Ramirez skidded in from the other side, nearly colliding with the suspect. It was messy and honest, the way arrests usually are when they are real. The kid fought like someone who had run out of ideas and found muscles instead. We carved him free of struggle and lay him on the asphalt, cuffed, panting curses into the night. "Backpack," I said, and Oates went gentle dangerous on the zippers the way you do when a pocket could hold more story than you want. He found a toolkit, spare props, tape, a tangle of wires. A phone wrapped in tinfoil because the internet said so. A half-eaten protein bar. The bag smelled like solder and grocery store coffee. Ramirez patted the hoodie and produced a folding knife, a vape pen, and a picture in a cracked plastic sleeve of the kid with a woman the right age to be a mom and a dog, the exact age to make. You forgive everything. Name? He said nothing. Silence can sound like loyalty or fear. It sounded like both. Quinn, the captain said in my ear, softer now, like the wind after a storm spends itself. We've got feds rolling for debriefs. EOD cleared the barge. Fireworks will happen another day. Bring our kid in. Watch the channels. Someone will be missing their toy and their recruit. This doesn't smell like a one-person op. We hauled him to his feet. He limped in a way that was either real or practiced. I kept an eye on his eyes. You can learn a lot about tomorrow from pupils dotted the perimeter. The crowd had thinned to those who didn't want to go home yet, because stories like this age, better if you tell them while they're still warm. Phones tracked us the way flowers track sun. I kept my gaze on the kid's shoulder blade between my fingers. If cameras wanted my face, they would get my hand instead. Hey, someone called. Are we safe? I wanted to say what Mr. Delaney said about books that they don't make you safe, they make you ready. I said, yes, because sometimes comfort is a kind of courage. At the station, we did the choreography of custody, prints, photos, personal effects into tubs. The kid's name turned out to be Sawyer Finch, which would have been a better poet. Then suspect, 23, local address that belonged to a mother who cried on a couch and said she thought he worked nights at the cannery. No priors, just the kind of friends on social who post videos of altercations with traffic cones. We separated him from his pack and his quiet. He asked for a lawyer like he knew the script, but didn't have the budget for a better part. In the interrogation room, the one with chairs that scold your posture, he stared at the bolt heads on the wall as if they might blink instructions in Morse. The feds arrived with haircuts that matched their binders. One of them, Agent Loring, whose suit had made better decisions than his tie, asked for a quick rundown. The captain gave it without adjectives. When he finished, Loring looked at me with an expression that translated to, "We do not expect heroes to be humble, but when they are, it gets confusing. You took a shot over open water at a move-in aerial device with a patrol rifle." Loring said neutral. Twice. I took the shots I could take, I said, which was as honest as I could be, without adding the parts about practice and poems, and the nickel that didn't fall. He nodded like a man agreeing with gravity. "And you were cut from a sniper selection course last month." I looked at the captain. He lifted one shoulder, neither apology nor solution. "Yes," I answered. The word didn't taste like failure anymore. It tasted like a door I'd learned to open from the hinge side. Loring folded his arms in a geometry that said, "This will matter later." Then he asked about Sawyer. The kid sat behind one-way glass like a ghost inventory. "We think he's connective tissue," Loring said. "Not origin, not mastermind. A runner. We'll work the devices for signatures." "You said you saw a second drone frame on the roof?" "Yes, missing a prop. I can draw the configuration if you need it." He slid a legal pad toward me. I sketched the airframe from memory, the position of the ESCs, the length of the arm booms, the way the harness cradle had been lashed with a kind of neatness that comes from watching too many tutorials and not enough consequences. Loring watched my hand, not the drawing, like he was inventorying my inventory. "Captain," he said, turning back, "we're going to run a sweep of rooftops and service tunnels. If there's a stash, we'll find it. In the meantime, keep your people visible. Tonight's failure will want a sequel or a scapegoat." I went to the women's locker room and washed my hands like I was late to a surgery. The mirror made an honest attempt to show me what I looked like when adrenaline went home. Lines I knew. A mouth that had learned to be calm in storms. hair that had decided today was a flag. I took the tiny Rilke out of my pocket and opened at random. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. I let the words rest there, pressed between my ribs and the memory of recoil. When I stepped back into the squad room, Oates was making coffee that lay somewhere between penance and assault. He grinned. Media wants your myth. You can have it, I said. He sobered. Look, Whitaker's going to hear about this. He meant the sergeant from Tryouts. And you're going to hear from people who think a shot is a resume. Keep your spine, Quinn. Today you were the person only you could be. Tomorrow you'll still be that person, with people trying to write your next page for you. Stop reading Mr. Delaney's staff pics, I said. But I felt the warning settle in like a seatbelt. We cut Sawyer loose to a cell with a steel bed and a thin mattress, and the feds started their quiet archaeology with his phone. The reactor core of my day stabilized into paperwork. My report tried to be precise without being poetry. I wrote, wind 5 to 15 knots from WSW. Target altitude variable. Initial miss no, not miss first impact on battery housing. Payload. Separation. Water impact negative detonation. Suspect apprehended east of seafront via culvert vector. I left out the part where my heart learned a new verb. Outside. Harbor days ended without fireworks but with food trucks serving consolation. Like it came in cones. The ocean went back to its old job of being enormous. The lighthouse at Whale Point kept blinking its steady code. I am here. I am here. I am here. Then the second drone took off. I didn't hear it at first. None of us did. It launched from somewhere. We hadn't searched because we didn't know we should out past the jetty, from a small fishing skiff that had been just another shape on water all afternoon. The first hint was the radio. A frantic call from a volunteer in a yellow vest still helping tear down vendor tents. Dispatch. This is Turner on the South Lot. Object airborne. Repeat. Object airborne over the Midway, heading north-northeast. Bigger than the first. Payload is oh Jesus, it's bigger. Oates and I were on our feet before the rest of the sentence finished. The captain barked positions like a conductor with a beating heart. All units, eyes up. Crowd control recommence. Quinn, I need height, I said. The church tower line will put the Ferris wheel in the background. I want the lighthouse. That's 1.5 miles, the captain said. With a patrol rifle? I'll take my kit, I answered. Already moving. The kit meant the department's designated marksman case, not a true sniper rig, but the best glass and barrel we had that didn't need a judge's signature to sign out. The lighthouse made a clean line across town, across water, a high platform. With everything I needed except time. Dispatch, the captain said into open air. Tell Whale Point we're on our way. Clear the tower. The road to the point is a thread along the cliff. We hung it with the siren's single blue note and the kind of silence that sits beside you in the passenger seating counts. The sky had gone from bruised gold to a color that cameras pretend to know. The Ferris wheel pulsed like an ambitious halo. Above it, a shape moved with intent, the second drone, larger, steadier, its payload slung tight and ugly. Trajectory? Oates asked, eyes on the road and the future. Toward the wheel, I said. If it hits at a hub, gravity will right. The rest, I didn't say the word collapse, words have power. And yet the mind drew pictures. We reached the lighthouse access gate. The keeper, Mr. Halloran, had it open and his cap off like respect. Heard you on the radio, he said. Keys are yours. Watch the last flight, the fifth step out squeaks like it wants attention. I ran. The lighthouse stairs are a coil that thinks you're the thread. My thighs burned a letter I would read later. At the lantern room, I ducked under the optic array and shouldered open the hatch to the external gallery. The ocean presented itself as if I were the only one invited. Quinn. Talk to me, the captain said, his voice now the rope I was tied to. On position, I said. dropping prone on paint that knew storms by name. Wind higher here 15 to 20 from WSW, gust to 25. Mirages nil temp falling. Target is at approximately 800 meters, altitude maybe 40 meters, vectoring northeast over the fairground. I have a line. Your outside patrol rifle doctrine, Loring said on the shared channel, and I pictured him in the command post with his tie still losing the argument. That shot is, yes, I said, because there wasn't time to litigate belief. We can't shoot over the wheel from the ground without a backdrop. From here, my backdrop is the Pacific. Oates' breath crackled through. We trust you. The drone seemed to feel the stare of an entire town. It shifted higher, perhaps, seeking thinner air where guesses have fewer consequences. The payload was wrapped in the same black tape as the first, but bigger, more patient-looking, like someone had graduated from forum posts to a credit card. I built a position with the ruthless kindness of a person who wants to live. Bipod down. Bag under stock, sling snug, elbows planted where the paint knew to take them. The Rilke in my pocket was a warm rectangle. My hands were steady, not because the tremor was gone, but because it had a job hold. Then let go. Captain, I said. I'm taking it when it clears the wheel, when there's sky under it, and ocean beyond. If I miss the first, I will not miss the second. Say when, he said. The entire town bent toward the lighthouse and the idea inside it. Through the scope, the drone became a problem that could be solved. I watched its wobble. Signature, the pilot's corrections, the way wind played it like a cheap violin. I did the math without numbers, lead, drop, gust, time of flight. I set the reticle just aft and low of the battery where the casing looked like it had been dremeled to fit a tell that the builder had hands that shook even when they were proud. Everything. Narrowed to the length of a breath and the width of a trigger shoe. Light flickered off the Ferris. Wheels spokes as if the town were blinking. The drone eased past the rim, now open water behind it. A slice of sky I could write in. On. I whispered. Quinn, the captain said, voice small with hope and fear folded together. Take. I pressed out the rifle, spoke. In the drone. Staggered in the air. No cinematic burst, just a stutter in its gyros. A coughing lean as if the sky had nudged it with one disapproving knuckle. A fine gray thread wisped from the body. The payload held. My breath didn't. The crosshair stayed. Where I'd taught it to live steady, curious, unafraid of the math we were about to share. Impact, I said, though I hadn't watched the hit so much as felt its absence in recoil. Batteries venting. Target wobble increasing. The drone rolled, recovered, tried to climb. Winged punished the attempt. It was still too near the Ferris wheel's crown for me to like anything about the geometry. Second shot on the harness. I whispered, not a question. Stand by, Quinn. The captain breathed, small in my ear against the ocean's larger voice. You have permission. Clear ocean backdrop confirms. I ran the reticle along the cinch point of the sling where black tape looked newer than the rest. The gust shivered. The drone left. I let it right by a syllable. My world narrowed to the part of my finger that had learned the difference between certainty and hope. Pressed out the rifle answered me like a bell that had decided to ring true. Through glass, I watched the tape split. The payload let go of the body with a sulky flop and fell in a clean, mean line toward the water beyond the breakwater. The drone yawed in surprise. Unburdened, it lurched upward, an animal that had lost the thing it mistook for purpose. Package separated, I called. Body on erratic climb. Harbor patrol to lighthouse, came a voice I didn't know yet. We have the splash mark. Recovery in progress. Keep the bird off the crowd. The crowd. Even from here, I could feel the intake of breath from those thousands of throats. The way sound collapses when a town remembers it's alive together. Children clutched glow sticks like talismans. Somewhere a brass band decided to stop trying. The Ferris wheel stilled like a held note. The drone banked inland as if insulted by the ocean's indifference. Whoever held its leash was good enough to be dangerous, but not good enough to win. They trimmed toward the midway again, lower now, perhaps assuming I'd flinch from a shot that put rooftops into my backdrop. They didn't know my line from here made a clean, uncompromising corridor across a mile of air and the honest mouth of the Pacific. Taking the body, I said. Battery housing, aft right quadrant. Copy, Loring said. Professionals can learn the sound of wanting in a voice. He didn't interrupt it. It is possible to love a trigger the way you love a hinge that always opens the same door. I took the slack out and let gravity, wind, and the small calm in my throat finish the sentence. Press. The second impact. No. Third landed where practice and luck shake hands and pretend they never met. The drone shuddered, coughed a thin spark, and bled altitude into the wind. 50 feet, 40, 30, a gull dove to investigate. The machine flailed in a last theater of intent and then tipped into a slow, almost graceful fall toward a slice of open water tucked between the end of the jetty and the black geometry of the sea. Splash, Harbor Patrol said, and the word came out like a prayer that had taken off its hat. I stayed on scope. Some parts of relief you can earn. Some parts you have to verify. The drone's carcass rolled in the undertow like a stunned insect. The payload 20 yards beyond the breakwater bobbed and hissed while Harbor Patrol gave it a circle nobody argued with. EOD was already shouting distances and ingredients into radios from the key. People on Main Street remembered how to talk. The Ferris wheel exhaled and turned half a defiant revolution, just to prove physics wasn't mad at it. Quinn, the captain said, voice ragged into gratitude, hold position until EOD sings lullabies. On glass, I said, letting my cheekbone rest on the stock like a tired friend. Below me, the keeper of Whale Point stepped onto the gallery and stood a respectful 2 paces back. Never liked those buzzing things, he muttered to the gulls. You don't use them to fish, they use you. I watched the water until Vega from EOD declared the package an embarrassment to bad actors everywhere. Kitchen timer shorted. Initiator drowned. Whoever built this did it from a comment thread, she said. Laughter stumbled and then found itself across the channels. Copy, the captain answered, louder now on purpose. Harbor days is over. Harbor is not. Guides, get folks home. We'll light the sky another night. I rolled to my back and let the lighthouse's cold paint print a map between my shoulders. The tremor in my hands had opinions again, but we'd learned to be a committee. I breathed, read the horizon's thin handwriting, and felt something. Like a hinge move inside me where Whitaker had tapped. I wasn't suddenly different. I was finally the person I'd been practicing to be in the dark, Quinn. Oates said on a private channel that sounded like the inside of a grin, before. You come down and get famous against your will. Harbor Patrol just found where the second launch originated. A skiff, 300 yards off the jetty abandoned. Now but there's video from a fisherman who doesn't understand privacy. We're freezing frames. Might get ourselves a face. On my way, I said, packing the rifle with care measured. In gratitude. Leave me the one where he underestimates the tide. By the time I climbed down the spiral, command had a rhythm again. Loring stood beside our captain at a makeshift map table on the pier, satellite printouts, grease pencil arcs, a coffee ring that looked like an eclipse. Someone had taped up a still from the fisherman's phone, grainy but legible. A man on. The skiff wore a wool cap despite summer, angular shoulders under an oilskin jacket. His face stayed turned away from the lens with the reflex of a person who expects cameras the way other people expect rain. 2 operators, Loring said. Finch on the roof, and this one on the water. Finch is connective tissue. Boat guys either backbone or a rented thumb. No registration on the skiff, numbers painted over. We'll work currents and CCTV for departure points. He glanced at me, then at the lighthouse. Good glasswork. He used the word like a handshake. Oates' shoulder bumped me, then scowled. As if he'd just remembered protocol. "We're lucky you ignored your captain." "I didn't," I said. "He changed his mind. That's leadership." I made sure the captain heard. He rolled his eyes and didn't hide the almost smile. The rest of the night was a long lesson in gravity. Paperwork has more mass than steel if you let it. EOD cleared and catalogued. Patrols set cones and comforted. Fire went back to station and cleaned what it had already cleaned. The festival's bones came down beneath the tired hands of volunteers who'd wanted music, not history. Back at the station, Sawyer Finch sat in interview 2 with his lawyer and a carton of milk old. Enough to know better and young enough to be a project. He stared blankly at the tabletop until Lauren set a photo of the skiff in front of him. Sawyer's faced fear, recognition, grief. It was all one expression when it was real. "Help yourself," Loring said, quiet. "Because he won't help you." Sawyer's eyes went to me through the glass, held, and then dropped. He whispered, and his lawyer whispered back. The dance would take hours or days. I left them to it. Not every fight needs my hands. In the lobby, Mr. Delaney leaned against a pillar with a brown paper bag in one hand and a look that said people had been unkind to his knees. "I heard," he said softly. "Tea, the good kind." He passed the bag to me like it might contain absolution. "Thank you," I said, meaning everything besides tea. "About tomorrow," he added, eyes twinkling. "There's a poem you'll like. It starts, 'I live my life in widening circles.' Seems about right for someone who just drew a big one around this town." I carried the tea to the briefing room and poured cups for anyone who reached without looking at the label. Oates made a face, then drank anyway. We watched the harbor darken out the window until the only lights left were the red blink on the crane and the steady little heartbeat of Whale Point. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. The text was a video, grainy, low angle, shot from the base of the lighthouse, pointed up at the gallery. At me. In the clip I lie prone, a thin line against the sky, the rifle a hyphen between breath and decision. The video holds for 10 seconds and then cuts to black. No caption, no emoji. Just the knowledge that someone had stood close enough to hear my footsteps on the stairs. "Captain," I said, handing him the phone. His jaw set. Loring leaned in. The video boned the room clean of chatter. "Timestamp tags at 2 minutes before your first shot," Loring said. "We had a third body on the ground. Could be a scout, could be ego. Either way, they were comfortable. Up close, comfortable." The word tasted like rust. We pushed the building harder, pulled exterior cams, canvassed the point, swept for a tossed cigarette or a dropped receipt. We found footprints that told us nothing except that men's shoes keep secrets. The gulls were not cooperative witnesses. Drone shuddered like a living thing that had learned its limits. A bright spit jumped from the belly, the kind of spark you see when wire meets consequence. The airframe yanked sideways as the battery hiccuped and then sagged. It pitched, fought the gust, and God bless physics, drifted clear of the Ferris wheel's rim into clean sky with nothing but ocean behind it. "Hold," I told myself, not the trigger. The wobble steadied into a brief, graceless hover. The payload stayed tight under the belly, taped like an idea someone wouldn't let go of. "Captain," I said, breath thinned by distance and paint, "I'm taking a second shot on the payload. Mount only if it drifts farther seaward. I don't want fragments over the midway." "Copy. All units stand by," his voice answered. Steadier now because steadiness was contagious. The wind leaned hard from the southwest, 20 plus with a taller gust wrapped inside. When it shouldered the drone left, I walked the reticle. Right and low, aiming for the strut clamp instead of the package, wrist not fist, breath not bravado. The metronome in my memory ticked once and forgot itself again. I pressed. The second hit cut a quiet syllable across 2 counties, The mount let go. The package dropped like a bad habit straight down into open water where it hissed, coughed steam, and rolled belly up like a seal deciding about a nap. The drone, lighter and insulted, jackknifed, tried to recover, lost the argument with a cross wind, and nosed into the Pacific with a sulky plop. Impact in water, negative surface burst, I called. My voice sounded like it belonged to somebody whose hands had finally joined the same committee as their heart. A beat later, the midway erupted cheers, sobs, a woman praying out loud and laughing at the same time. Boat horns harmonized. The Ferris wheel paused and then kept turning because momentum can be a kind of mercy. Quinn. Loring came on the channel, clipped but human. Stay on glass. We've dispatched EOD and harbor to your splash points. We don't know if there's a third. I kept the scope on the long line between skiff and shore. The sea had always been big, now it felt crowded. Far past the jetty, a small boat that had been background turned into a sentence. A skiff with a single outboard. 2 figures, one with a controller in his lap and both wearing that brittle calm that comes from meaning to be invisible. Skiff. 2 souls aboard, I called. West-southwest of the point, 400 meters off the line from the jetty. One subject is holding a transmitter, possibly switching to a secondary. Harbor 1, Harbor 2, converge on that skiff, the captain ordered. No lights. No siren. We want surprise, not theater. The skiff's bow dipped as the driver throttled up in a panic he tried to name as strategy. He aimed not out to sea, but toward the seam where the breakwater met the cliff, a gap just wide enough for someone who knew local water like they knew the inside of a bad idea. Engine disable? Oates asked on the net, and we all pictured. The same textbook that nobody loves to open. Negative, the captain said at once. Harbor will handle. No rounds onto open water unless life or limb is in immediate jeopardy. I breathed. The metronome kept its mouth shut. Harbor 1 came in high and quiet, cutting a diagonal to intercept. The skiff tried to thread the gap. The driver misjudged swell. The outboard cavitated, screamed, bit again. The controller in the passenger's hands lifted instinct, panic, or training. A black rectangle with a little antenna, switch guards peeled back. I saw his thumb go for a toggle the way you see a glass slip from a table, and imagine the shatter. Captain, I said, and the word was small because the choice was big. Thumb on a live board. If there's a pre-planted unit shoreside, harbor. Push them off the gap, the captain barked. Now, Harbor 1 rose on a swell and shouldered in, nosing the skiff just enough to spoil the passenger's balance. He pinwheeled his arms. The controller went arcing, a cheap bird, and splashed. The driver cussed loud enough for 3 radios. Harbor 2 slid in on the other side. The skiff spun, pinned between competence and the cliff face. The passenger dove for the water in a burst of bad decisions. A deckhand caught him by the collar and dragged him back aboard with the ancient strength of a man who'd hauled nets before he hauled suspects. Subjects detained. Harbor 1 called, breathless. We've got them both. Controller is wet. And irretrievable. Copy, came Loring. If there was a third device, it's not getting a kiss from that switch. EOD, status on Splash 2. Same as the first, Laird came back. Cooked timer, vented battery, lots of tape where expertise should be. Whoever built these believed in YouTube more than schematics. I rolled onto my back on the lighthouse gallery and let the world be enormous for a count of 3. The sky had the color of relief. My hands decided to be hands again. Somewhere behind me, the Fresnel lens ticked, the glass equivalent of clearing its throat. Quinn, the captain said, softer now. Come on down. Bring your kit. Then meet harbor at the quay. Loring wants one of us on the dock when the skiff kisses land. The lighthouse stairs felt shorter on the way down because gravity believed in me again. Oates was waiting at the base with the cruiser. Door open and a grin that tried to be cool and forgot how. We drove without the siren this time. The town had given enough blood to noise for one night. At the quay, Harbor 1 nosed in with both suspects zip-tied and salted. The driver looked mid-30s, a face that had made peace with corners. The passenger was younger, wet, shaking with the kind of adrenaline that doesn't know where to live after it's done saving you. "You two just ruined a lot of people's evening," Oates said, "and saved their lives in the process by being bad at your chosen hobby." He has a way of saying the mean truth in a voice that sounds like a hug. "Counsel," the driver said, "automatic." "Seat," I said, pointing to a bollard because furniture is a luxury in moments like this. We catalogued what the C hadn't. Stolen, handheld radio, extra batteries in a waterproof box, a phone in a Faraday pouch, a knife, tape, an index card with a list of call signs that weren't ours, and GPS coordinates scribbled like a person who writes numbers where sentences should go. None of it was golden. All of it was heavy. Loring arrived with a team whose steps matched, which is how you know they've rehearsed this play. He nodded at me, not quite a salute, not quite a smile, and then went about being federal. "We'll take primary," he told the captain. "Your people stand by, right clean, stay loud and visible tonight." "Loud and visible," the captain repeated, then turned to me. "You good?" "Yes," I said, tasting the word for any. "Hidden grit. Then take a walk," he said, "before you have to narrate this to a dozen microphones." I walked the quay. The harbor smelled like kelp and fried batter and aftermath. Mr. Delaney was there in a peacoat that had known a different war. He lifted the little book in his hand like a toast. "For the pauses," he said again, and this time I laughed, because laughter wasn't treason anymore. On the way back to the station, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That shot, though. A link I didn't touch. Being turned into a clip is how strangers believe they own your moment. I set the phone face down and watched the blur of lights on wet pavement instead. Inside, the squad room had picked up the careful hum that follows chaos. Reports stacked, radios soothed. The coffee maker apologized for earlier by making something almost drinkable. Oates drafted our supplemental while I did a diagram of the lighthouse angles for the file. My hands were steady enough to be trusted with straight lines. Whitaker called as I finished. I didn't know I wanted him to until I heard his voice. "Quinn," he said, "I saw the feed. I don't call to second-guess someone who just shot above their pay grade and saved the county. I called to say I've seen shooters choke on easier days." "You didn't," I swallowed. Pride is a hard thing to carry and a harder thing to put down. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "Wynn did some, Harbor did some, Luck did none." He chuckled, surprised by me again. "Come back to Tryouts," he said. "I'm not promising anything except better coffee than your department makes." I looked at the Rilke on my desk. At Oates' paper, where his T's looked like tents. At the whiteboard where someone had drawn a gull wearing a badge. "I'll think about it," I answered, which was truer than yes and kinder than no. We booked the skiff crew driver as Rory Bent, 40, sheet metal worker with a boat and a habit of bad debts. Passenger as Cade Hargreaves, 26, unemployed. Online names that were masks that were other masks. Neither wanted to talk. Their phones would. Vega had already cracked one enough to peel back a message thread full of emojis that meant harm if you spoke their accent. Before midnight, EOD found what we'd all been afraid of. A third device, small, taped under a vendor table where overripe lemons had hidden everything all weekend. It was primitive and patient, no radio receiver, just a kitchen timer and the belief that timers solve all problems. We evacuated the immediate stalls, watched Laird and Vega work methodically, and let out a collective breath when they cored it like a bad apple. Someone's plan had chapters, Laird said, but the chapters were crowdsourced. Loring turned his binder to a clean page and named task forces like saints. "We'll trace parts, watch lists, boats. People who practice at this scale publish their practice. We find the tutorials they liked. We find the comment section. We find the mentor they never met. By 2 a.m., Harbor Days was a skeleton, made of folding tables and trampled napkins. The barge rode easy dark water. The Ferris wheel paused, and I closed in a long blink. The town went home the way survivors go home slowly, in clumps, talking too loudly or not at all. I stepped outside the station for air. That didn't belong to HVAC. The sky had shaved itself down to stars. Somewhere, an engine rumbled like a lullaby written by Diesel. My hands were in my pockets before I told them to be. I pulled out the little book and opened it at random again. Nearby is the country they call life. You will know it by its seriousness. Rilke always sounded like he had stood a tower watch in another century and got the same weather report. Footsteps came behind me. Oates. He leaned on the brick next to me and didn't talk for a while, which is the oldest kind of friendship. You going to take Whitaker up on it? He asked finally. Maybe, I said. But not because a shot makes me a different person today than I was yesterday. I want it for the right reasons, not because a crowd cheered for physics. He nodded. Whatever you do, you'll still be the one who puts her body where panic wants to stand. We watched the blink of Whale Point in the distance, steady, diffuse, patient. A gull laughed at a joke gulls tell each other about people who think they can own the ocean. My phone buzzed again and again, and then stopped. The world was full of people who wanted a piece of this story. They could keep their pieces. I had the whole dot by dawn. The press trucks curled around Maine like another kind of parade. The captain took the podium and said the words that make a town breathe. Loring said the words that make a network run B-roll. I stood behind them and held my own spine upright, which is a job no one can delegate. A little girl broke free from her mother and beelined for me, hair flying, cheeks still sugared. She stopped just shy of my shoes and looked up with a concentration that would have frightened a lesser heart. Did you do the big shot? She asked. I did a shot I was very ready to take, I told her. Her mother caught up. Breathless apologies. Staking their claim. I knelt so the girl and I were eye to eye. Here's a secret, I said. Sometimes your hands shake. You can give the shake a job. Mine's to remind me to breathe. She considered that with the seriousness of Rilke's country, then nodded like we had signed a treaty. Back inside, the captain signed my overtime sheet with a flourish that would bankrupt a calligrapher. Go home, he said. Sleep. That's an order. Home was the apartment over the bookstore where the roof hesitated about loyalty when it rained. I showered until salt and smoke and adrenaline turned into a story the drain could keep. I set the patrol rifle case by the door and the Rilke on the knitstand. I lay on the bed and listened to the roof argue with clouds I couldn't fix. For the first time since Whitaker's fingers had tapped his sternum, my body remembered rest as something other than a rumor. When I woke near noon, the town had decided to keep being a town. Mr. Delaney had propped a sign in his window. Asterisk, asterisk. Thank you, everyone who chose careful. Asterisk, asterisk. Tourists took pictures of the Ferris wheel with the solemnity people reserve for places they almost lost. The harbor smelled like fry oil and forgiveness. At the station, a courier envelope waited with my name. In a hand I didn't know. Inside no letter, just a photo. Surveillance still, high angle, grainy, the cannery roof earlier that afternoon. The second drone frame under the tarp before we found it. And a third figure in the background no one had noticed yet, face turned away, hair under a watch cap, a tattoo peeking from a sleeve, a line of dots arranged like a constellation. On the back, a note in block print. You missed one. Next time I won't. No signature, no cologne on the paper. No smudge except intention. Loring took the photo with pincers in his voice. Copycats, he said, clout chasers. Or a teacher who resents losing a class. He looked at me. You up for a briefing later? We'll need your eyes on rooftops and your brain on wind. I'm up for whatever keeps the town boring, I said, and meant it. Drone shuddered like a living thing that had learned its limits. A bright spit jumped from the belly, the kind of spark you see when wire meets consequence. The airframe yanked sideways as the battery hiccuped and then sagged. It pitched, fought the gust, and God bless physics, drifted clear of the Ferris wheel's rim into clean sky with nothing but ocean behind it. Hold, I told myself, not the trigger. The wobble steadied into a brief, graceless hover. The payload stayed tight under the belly, taped like an idea someone wouldn't let go of. Captain, I said, breath thinned by distance and paint, I'm taking a second shot on the payload. Mount only if it drifts farther seaward. I don't want fragments over the midway. Copy. All units stand by, his voice answered. Steadier now because steadiness was contagious. The wind leaned hard from the southwest, 20 plus with a taller gust wrapped inside. When it shouldered the drone left, I walked the reticle. Right and low, aiming for the strut clamp instead of the package, wrist not fist. Breath not bravado. The metronome in my memory ticked once and forgot itself again. I pressed. The second hit cut a quiet syllable across 2 counties. The mount let go. The package dropped like a bad habit straight, down into open water where it hissed, coughed steam, and rolled belly up like a seal deciding about a nap. The drone, lighter and insulted, jackknifed, tried to recover, lost the argument with a crosswind, and nosed into the Pacific with a sulky plop. Impact in water, negative surface burst, I called. My voice sounded like it belonged to somebody whose hands had finally joined the same committee as their heart. A beat later, the midway erupted cheers, sobs, a woman praying out loud and laughing at the same time. Boat horns harmonized. The Ferris wheel paused and then kept turning because momentum can be a kind of mercy. Quinn. Loring came on the channel, clipped but human. Stay on glass. We've dispatched EOD and harbor to your splash points. We don't know if there's a third. I kept the scope on the long line between skiff and shore. The sea had always been big, now it felt crowded. Far past the jetty, a small boat that had been background turned into a sentence. A skiff with a single outboard. 2 figures, one with a controller in his lap and both wearing that brittle calm that comes from meaning to be invisible. Skiff. 2 souls aboard, I called. West-southwest of the point, 400 meters off the line from the jetty. One subject is holding a transmitter, possibly switching to a secondary. Harbor 1, Harbor 2, converge on that skiff, the captain ordered. No lights. No siren. We want surprise, not theater. The skiff's bow dipped as the driver throttled up in a panic he tried to name as strategy. He aimed not out to sea, but toward the seam where the breakwater met the cliff, a gap just wide enough for someone who knew local water like they knew the inside of a bad idea. Engine disable? Oates asked on the net, and we all pictured. The same textbook that nobody loves to open. Negative, the captain said at once. Harbor will handle. No rounds onto open water unless life or limb is in immediate jeopardy. I breathed. The metronome kept its mouth shut. Harbor 1 came in high and quiet, cutting a diagonal to intercept. The skiff tried to thread the gap. The driver misjudged swell. The outboard cavitated, screamed, bit again. The controller in the passenger's hands lifted instinct, panic, or training. A black rectangle with a little antenna, switch guards peeled back. I saw his thumb go for a toggle the way you see a glass slip from a table, and imagine the shatter. Captain, I said, and the word was small because the choice was big. Thumb on a live board. If there's a pre-planted unit shoreside, harbor. Push them off the gap, the captain barked. Now, Harbor 1 rose on a swell and shouldered in, nosing the skiff just enough to spoil the passenger's balance. He pinwheeled his arms. The controller went arcing, a cheap bird, and splashed. The driver cussed loud enough for 3 radios. Harbor 2 slid in on the other side. The skiff spun, pinned between competence and the cliff face. The passenger dove for the water in a burst of bad decisions. A deckhand caught him by the collar and dragged him back aboard with the ancient strength of a man who'd hauled nets before he hauled suspects. Subjects detained. Harbor 1 called, breathless. We've got them both. Controller is wet. And irretrievable. Copy, came Loring. If there was a third device, it's not getting a kiss from that switch. IAD, status on Splash 2. Same as the first, Laird came back. Cooked timer, vented battery, lots of tape where expertise should be. Whoever built these believed in YouTube more than schematics. I rolled onto my back on the lighthouse gallery and let the world be enormous for a count of 3. The sky had the color of relief. My hands decided to be hands again. Somewhere behind me, the Fresnel lens ticked, the glass equivalent of clearing its throat. Quinn, the captain said, softer now. Come on down. Bring your kit. Then meet Harbor at the quay. Loring wants one of us on the dock when the skiff kisses land. The lighthouse stairs felt shorter on the way down because gravity believed in me again. Oates was waiting at the base with the cruiser. Door open and a grin that tried to be cool and forgot how. We drove without the siren this time. The town had given enough blood to noise for one night. At the quay, Harbor 1 nosed in with both suspects zip-tied and salted. The driver looked mid-30s, a face that had made peace with corners. The passenger was younger, wet, shaking with the kind of adrenaline that doesn't know where to live after it's done saving you. You two just ruined a lot of people's evening, Oates said, and saved their lives in the process by being bad at your chosen hobby. He has a way of saying the mean truth in a voice that sounds like a hug. Counsel, the driver said, automatic. Seat, I said, pointing to a bollard because furniture is a luxury in moments like this. We catalogued what the sea hadn't. Stolen, handheld radio. Extra batteries in a waterproof box. A phone in a Faraday pouch. A knife, tape, an index card with a list of call signs that weren't ours. And GPS coordinates scribbled like a person who writes numbers where sentences should go. None of it was golden. All of it was heavy. Loring arrived with a team whose steps matched, which is how you know they've rehearsed this play. He nodded at me, not quite a salute, not quite a smile, and then went about being federal. We'll take primary, he told the captain. Your people stand by, right clean, stay loud and visible tonight. Loud and visible, the captain repeated, then turned to me. You good? Yes, I said, tasting the word for any. Hidden grit. Then take a walk, he said. Before you have to narrate this to a dozen microphones. I walked the quay. The harbor smelled like kelp and fried batter and aftermath. Mr. Delaney was there in a peacoat that had known a different war. He lifted the little book in his hand like a toast. For the pauses, he said again, and this time I laughed, because laughter wasn't treason anymore.